Hi, welcome to Cambridge Inside Out, second segment. I'm Judy Nathans.
And I'm still Robert Winters.
Yes, and it's still new September 27th, 2016.
Still September 27th,
yes.
And we are in that delightful little position between the last city council meeting and the special meeting on Thursday when they will select the new city manager. So we spent the last 27 minutes talking.
And when do they actually come on board?
Well, the thing is, if the new city manager came from outside, then he would probably have to give notice to his current employer, and there would have to be a transition during which the city manager would not be Richard Rossi. It would be
we have our capable deputy or
what would happen is the city council would have to basically give thumbs up for either the deputy city manager to serve as acting city manager or a department head of consequence, like the Commissioner of Public Works.
Why would you do that when you have a deputy city manager?
Well, it's been done in the past.
Isn't that snubbing them?
Ralph Dunphy was Commissioner of Public Works, served as acting city manager for a time.
Was there? Why? It's like having a vice president. That's when they come up.
Well, because it's the council's choice to do that, and if they happen to have a good relationship.
Oh, so the council chooses who they want to be acting?
Still, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's still the council's employee.
Because I think her name was mentioned, and it seemed like that would probably be a given that it was going to happen.
Right. But on the other hand, if they choose Louis DePasquale, who already is the head of finances for the city.
They'd have to fill his position, but it would still be.
But the thing is that's the rarest of rarities where there wouldn't actually have to be a transition at all. Louis would just basically move his desk.
Exactly.
And serve as city manager straight away. In fact, as the head of the finance department, I believe he would be allowed to act as acting city manager until he became officially signed his contract as city manager. So.
He could do it all.
Right. I mean, thered still have to be a contract negotiation. Right.
Well, that was brought up by, I think...
Councilor Mazin was suggesting last night at the meeting
I think it was understandable. It's like, why negotiate a contract after you've only selected, then they have more leverage?
What has happened in the past, though, is the contract negotiations are actually done with a lawyer who serves
separate
for the council, and they kind of negotiate.
But never done before, so they don't know what the salary is before. Right. They know what the bottom line is. What was it, $275?
Yeah, more or less bottom line.
Okay.
My personal read of it was that there was at least some attempting made to leverage who could be selected based on who was willing to work for what. But I don't know.
Oh, that doesn't make sense.
I think there was a little bit of posturing going on.
Right.
But I don't think it's going to really amount to much of anything because I think the vote will be relatively clear come Thursday.
Okay.
So anyway, so when we last had our program here, was 2 weeks ago, there was there have been actually 2 city council meetings have occurred in the interim.
Yes.
With some interesting things and some not so interesting things that have taken place. So there was September 19th and then yesterday's September 26th.
Right.
Right. One of the things, I know we talked about it last time we had a show about the city council passed like 2 separate orders that were going to just lower speed limits citywide to 20 miles per hour.
Yeah.
Well, the traffic director came back and said, guess what, boys and girls? You can't do it because the state passed a law that doesn't even go into effect for 90 days. So if you're going to try and change it, you have to wait till I think in November to do it. Furthermore, and he was pretty clear about it, he says that just willy-nilly dropping the speed limit to 20 miles per hour didn't make a whole lot of sense. And that even under the state law, you have to kind of justify whether you want to lower it to 20 for a special safety zone.
Okay.
But you could citywide drop it to 25. So I think that's kind of what's going to really happen, regardless of what the original city council.
So if it's not marked, what is it, 30?
Basically, I think what you'll see is there'll be signs would go up at all the entries to the city and on major roads, and it says citywide speed limit 25 miles per hour. Boston is also looking to
unless otherwise noted, because around schools it's like 15 or something.
For example, on DCR parkways, unless they choose to lower it, they like along Memorial Drive.
Yeah, it's 30, 35.
Yeah, the city doesn't have control over that.
Right.
So So that's a DCR road, so they get to say on that. I thought it was a wise move to suggest that we at least ask DCR to lower the speed limit on Fresh Pond Parkway as it weaves its way through.
No, absolutely.
Through the larches.
There's traffic there anyway, so yeah.
That's a nutty section of road that should be lowered and should have been lowered a long time ago, so that'll happen. So anyway, I think what will ultimately happen is that it'll be 25 miles per hour.
Did that happen last night or at the 19th?
That was on the meeting of the 12th. The council voted, but on the 19th is when the traffic director came right back and said, "Hold on, folks. Before you jump the gun and look like you're saving everybody's lives by lowering the speed limit to 2 miles an hour, stop. Just stop." So anyway, I'm sure they'll take a proper vote when they're legally allowed to do so. But they'll actually have a little bit more background from the traffic department about what sort of makes sense. Now, as we've certainly had some interest in, at the September 19th meeting, the Commissioner of Public Works came back with kind of a report saying about some of the potential problems with the polystyrene ordinance implementation.
Which is to go into effect October 20th.
Right. As we've commented in the past, I think most of us were pretty okay with putting limitations or bans on foam. Poly. Styrofoam. Expanded polystyrene, EPS.
Right. Not the number 6 PS, which Plastic is the oriented polystyrene, which is sort of rigid. It's a way to think of it.
And I think, as Owen O'Riordan, the commissioner, said that if you in your zeal to do what you think is the right thing because of the inability to actually recycle some of these things currently, you may be doing harm to our existing programs. For example, you collect things that's supposed to be compostable, but if it isn't really, then the entire load of organics might be rejected potentially.
Like bioplastics are the real problem because they're clear, they look like regular plastic. And if they go into a recycling, it's not good, or most of the time they're going to get thrown out because they can't be composted. It's very complicated, folks, and they're getting a lot of pushback from businesses.
Right. So I believe what will happen is that the commissioner who has the authority to grant waivers for a year will be granting a lot of waivers because until such time as there's a feasible way of actually doing the recycling of some of these things or composting of some of these.
Or just the material that's going to actually be either recycled or composted. And right now, there is an assistant to collect it. So just pay attention.
So these are the kind of agenda items that I particularly enjoy. Things where there's an expert.
But there was hardly any discussion because I think, people didn't get it. They don't get it.
I don't want to dig on the councilors too much, but they really don't read up on a lot of the things that they passed.
I was in a McDonald's. Yes, I go to McDonald's sometimes, and the top of the McDonald's or Supporter Square is a number 6 clear top. That's going to be outlawed.
Right.
All right. Yeah. Straws, who knows what they're made of, but you're not supposed to have straws. So those are going to be thrown out anyway, and we have been throwing them out. It's just that ours is the most restrictive, thinking they were doing such great things, but meanwhile, what do you substitute and what?
In this, and I could give other examples, but I won't. There's sort of a dilemma where elected officials want to look as progressive as possible. It
was an election year.
No matter what that means. And they're not necessarily concerned about the consequences.
It's called inspirational
or aspirational
environmentalism or something, without looking at how's the stuff getting processed. And also, just to be fair, the processing rules have changed in this past year as well as what's getting recycled. So there's a lot of confusion, but meanwhile, when there's confusion, you should sort of wait before you make rules like that.
I think that's fair.
But I think that so you know what, as long as people don't say, oh, they're using that, and why are they using that? That's, all the little do-gooders.
Well, but, the rhetoric was, say, well, we've got to get ahead of the curve. We want Cambridge to be on the forefront, there's not a whole lot of value in being on the forefront.
No, when it's just to say it.
What do they say, jump the shark? Right, they were jumping the shark.
And you can't compare it to the bring your own bag because much as people have problems with it, that was a single point of contact. It's when you leave a store. And there was a lot more ability to advertise that, get bags out. This is very different. This is
Right.
takeout containers. This is
That's
packaged food. This is a lot of things. So
Right. Whereas,
I'm just
whereas
saying.
the bring your bag ordinance, in terms of
Yeah.
the potential for harming the existing program, is exactly the opposite.
No, I mean, you can still recycle plastic. I mean,
Right.
that was one of
But
my arguments.
The plastic
is that,
bags
yeah.
in the recycling stream actually was a problem with the
Right.
works. It gummed up the works.
Right,
so
but
they
I
had to
don't know if
stop
that
it.
was so, right, but you
but-
could recycle it at least, but that, you're right.
Yeah.
The issue is, we should be bringing our own bag, which is a lot
Right.
easier than bringing your own
You know,
package to put a chicken in.
Right.
I mean,
What is that? Is that the Hippocratic oath, first do no harm?
yeah,
So there are sometimes some situations where
Yeah.
in your zeal to be out ahead of the progressive curve, you might actually do more harm than good.
do your research, folks,
Do your
before
research.
you promote things that, and just follow it, the whole cycle of it, not just
Right.
the beginning. So,
Now, I
we'll
don't want to
keep
go too much
reporting
into
on that. No, no.
inclusionary zoning here, right?
Oh,
but the
yeah,
thing is,
that-
there's
that's
another
your
example
bailiwick.
where
I don't know
Right, I'm not,
that
and
much about
I don't want to run down that road here because that's.
why, you don't like the 20% thing?
I actually like the idea that we might be
Yeah.
able to get 20%
Yeah.
of all housing
Yeah.
number of units in housing over a certain scale.
To be affordable. That's basically what that
But I'm
says,
not
right?
yet convinced that
Yeah.
that's economically feasible. I think it's a good goal, but I still need a little convincing.
Is
that
there
in
any
fact-
other city doing that?
Well,
Hasn't Boston proposed that?
no.
Oh, I thought
No,
he did.
No, no, and I think what's the situation is that if you base your law, your zoning requirements based on current economic climate where the rates for borrowing money are at historic lows,
Yes.
what happens if 2 years from now,
Yeah.
when you borrow money, there's no longer like 0% interest loans, but in
Right.
fact it's gone up. It may actually get to the point where people who are thinking about building housing with inclusionary units say, well, we're not going to build the housing. We can do much better, just build the lab.
So,
I know the council is
but how
within-
long in effect does that happen? Can't you change that? Can't you just say it's a 1-year thing or 2-year, or is that too
And I
problematic?
testified at the ordinance committee, actually at the housing committee about
Yeah.
this, is that you want to be a little bit careful because to change a zoning law takes 2/3 majority.
Okay.
And I just don't see politically there being the way to get 2/3 of the
see.
people to say, let's reduce
I see what you're saying.
the inclusionary zoning requirements. So the latest I heard, they were talking about a
what's the
phase-in.
latest?
Now,
Well, that makes more sense.
it makes some sense,
Yeah.
but then, I think some councils, well, how fast can we phase it in? It's got to do it in record time. So,
They're talking like 2020 to be to reach
Not
that,
even,
maybe?
not even. I think it's
That's
much
only
quicker.
a few years away.
yeah. So anyway, at least they're thinking about
Okay.
the possibility that jumping it a little might be a little problematic.
So is there a vote? I mean, there was a report.
So
right?
what happened is,
Yeah,
is that
what's the
at
process?
the previous, actually, I think it's
The
at this
19th?
meeting.
This meeting, the
there
one
were
last
two
time.
housing committee reports, one of which included an order that basically forwards the recommendations to jump, from the community development department to make it 20%, and some other changes as well, which we won't go into.
Okay.
And now the matter goes to the ordinance committee. And I don't know whether, I think they probably
there a
have it
hearing on
scheduled.
that,
There'll be
or-
a series of hearings on it.
Okay.
And that's where the rubber meets the road. I mean,
see.
you don't ordain it until it goes through the ordinance committee,
Okay.
so that's a coming.
All
So it's
right.
out of housing, or
All
maybe
right.
they're still gonna keep housing involved in
Yeah.
this, but ordinance committee is basically where the zoning law changes. So that's a coming, all right?
Okay.
It's certainly worth saying that, they passed the Community Preservation Act
Oh, is that
allotments.
CPA? Is that what that's
CPA.
called? Okay, I kept hearing
Which
that.
is
I didn't
always
know what it was.
80% of the CPA funds. Used to be like a 1-for-1 match, state funds for every dollar that we raise.
Okay.
They match a state fund, but that was before all the other cities and towns got in on the CPA. Now we get a lot less state match, so it's mainly, the bulk of it is from city revenue that's generated
And who
locally.
decides what's done with that?
There's recommendations from the CPA committee, which is a committee of 9 persons.
Oh, so
appointed by the
that's a
manager.
committee also.
They make recommendations, but their recommendations are just that, and the city council must then approve it.
I see.
It's always been 80% for affordable housing, 10% for historic preservation, and 10% for open space acquisition, which is the minimum on the last two and the maximum on the first. Not this year, but in some past years, there have been counselors and people from the public who said, well, let's just change it. So we should be 30, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, or whatever, but it never goes that way. And the argument has always been that for every dollar you put toward affordable housing, there were some available matching funds through federal, state sources and other
So there's more
grants,
money
so that you
for
could
that,
leverage more money, and then you could always just use regular tax
So
money.
that's just the allocation,
others.
that's just the percentage.
Right.
What about the actual projects? Who decides those?
Those are part of the recommendations from the CPA committee.
Oh, so they also
Yeah.
make recommendations
yeah.
based on
So,
specifics?
so for example, in the open space part, I
Yeah.
think it might be actually historic preservation.
Okay.
There was $100,000 or more going towards the restoration of the magazine beach.
Oh,
down at the,
that
the
gun
powder
house, so
magazine.
the powder
Which
house,
will actually
okay.
hopefully turn it into an active use and,
Right,
and a
that's
good
ongoing.
public
Okay,
purpose.
that's good.
So CPA money is reused very creatively.
So who
and
lobbies the CPA for these things?
Well, they do have these public meetings, but they tend to be kind of pro forma because I think the inside players have already made the decisions.
Really?
I stopped going to them for that reason. In fact, I'll tell you something. One time I spoke at the council meeting and I said, I'd like to propose that we change it from, instead of 80%, 10%, 10% to 79.9999999% and then 10.00001%,
Or-
just to prove that you can do something other than do 80, 10, 10.
That didn't go over, did it?
No, of course not. But I was trying to make the point that when the CPA was first enacted, which is I think in 2001, there was very much an intention that it be primarily for affordable housing. But they do take votes every year, and if people were to argue in favor of a different kind of allotment, there should be a democratic process leading to that possibility. But if anybody even suggests otherwise, they're viewed as
But what
a
I don't
pariah.
understand is how do they find out where affordable, does a developer come to them? I mean, you say it's the committee, but who's on this committee? I mean,
It's the Affordable Housing Trust players on the committee.
Oh, okay, so
Some of
they
the
already know what's
nonprofit housing
possible?
developers. Yeah, so
Okay.
they're very
So they're
clear about
basically
what's
coming to the
happening.
table with, all right, we have
This
these
has become-
proposals, or we have this stuff.
There's no question that the CPA bucket has
Yes.
basically become the bucket from which you draw
Yeah,
funds to
so it's
support.
very important
It's the
thing.
number one way of
Yeah.
funding affordable housing. Actually, more so than building new ones, I think it needs to be emphasized. It's preserving existing ones because there are buildings that are supposedly, I guess they call them expiring use buildings, where
Well,
they
those
have
are the HUD buildings, no?
Well, right, but the thing is they were actually privately developed, but with federal
Right.
monies,
Right.
with an understanding that they would be affordable, whatever that means, for X number of years. After which they would then be, you could then put them right on the free market.
So does the city have some say about that?
There
When they get expired?
There has been some state legislative intervention that maybe gives some right of first refusal or whatever, but it's basically a negotiation. So you take some of this money here and you basically buy the extended affordability in existing buildings, which
Have
is
they done that?
Yes,
I know
they've
there's
done it
one that-
multiple
Range
times.
Towers, isn't that it?
Yeah. There's several expiring use buildings, and I believe that is the highest priority.
Oh, okay, so
of the
that
Affordable Housing
that
Trust.
makes sense. In
It
other
totally
words,
makes sense.
keep what you've already got as
it's
affordable.
it's the most
and the
effective
most
use of the
efficient. You
money.
don't have to build. Okay.
Keep preserving an existing affordable unit.
808
is a,
Memorial too.
I think those ones are pretty much in place. They're okay.
Yeah, because I'm
right?
just trying to think of the places that came under
Right.
that. Okay, that's
Right.
good to know.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people don't realize
I'm
those
not
things.
in any way disputing the wisdom
Yeah.
of city officials in making the choices that they've
Right.
made. I think they do a great job.
And also, where are you going to build? I mean, it's hard enough to the
is.
inclusionaries. Those developers already
Yeah.
got the properties. Where are you going to build affordable housing? There's no
it's
land
tough.
anymore, right?
It's tough. Yeah.
What was the last what they did over
Well, I
on
mean, they
River
do.
Street?
There's a little one here, a little one
Yeah,
there. You know.
pockets,
But ultimately, it's
Yeah.
it's sort of like you're throwing a thimbleful of water at a tidal wave. So
Okay.
it's tough.
So that's that. That's the housing, CPA,
Yeah.
zoning. What else happened last night after I stopped watching?
Well, see, the CPA was actually the previous meeting, but last
Oh, right,
night,
yeah.
one of the things, and one of the things I have a personal focus on, and you know this, is that I'm sort of a big boards and commissions guy.
Yes.
I
Get
just
on those boards.
To me, this
Serve
is
your
what
city.
civics is supposed to
Yeah.
be. Is get on that.
And Cambridge has so many
right.
opportunities.
If you're a whack job, don't apply. But if you're a reasonable person and 95% of Canterbridgians, regardless of what Howie Carr may say, 95% of Canterbridgians are pretty cool people.
What does he say? We're like
We're
commies?
moon bats.
Oh,
We're the
moon
moon
bats.
bats,
Okay.
right? Yeah. But the thing is there's some incredible people
Yeah.
with incredible professional credentials, people
Yes.
with wisdom, smarts, good-hearted people.
Yes.
People with some time to volunteer as well.
Yes.
Who serve on boards and commissions. So one of the things that was sort of a big prominent piece of last night's meeting, where there were a lot of reappointments and new appointments to boards and commissions. Richie Rossi, to his tremendous credit, has really turned around the boards and commissions. Bob Healy, I love Bob to death, but truth is he let these things slide.
Yeah.
And Richie and Lisa Peterson, Lisa's really riding herd on this, deputy city manager, have really, really put a lot of effort and thought into doing this right. Now that said, I have to say, I was looking at some of the appointments there, and I looked at, there were 3 people who were reappointed to the planning board for 5-year terms, who were people I was thrilled to see reappointed, but I knew some of the activists were, and at least one city councilor was going to gripe about, because, well, shouldn't we have term limits? Basically, I'm talking about Hugh Russell.
Oh, yeah, he's been on for a long time.
Hugh is such an asset to the planning board. You know, he's been on a long time, but he's the guy who kind of knows the long view more than anybody else, and it would be a tremendous loss to not have Hugh Russell on the planning board. So he was reappointed, as was Tom Sinevich and Steve Cohen. Steve's not been on nearly as long.
Steve Cohen. Which Steve Cohen is this?
He lives around a corner from me, Ellsworth or Maple or one of those streets.
Oh, okay. Yeah. A lot of Steve Cohen.
He's actually a developer, so he's like the developer on there.
I see.
Right. It's mainly architects and planners or whatever, but it's a pretty good bunch they got there now. I'm pretty happy with it. But, you know, there's some people who just want to kind of overthrow the planning board. They're evil. They grant special permits. They're destroying the city and whatever. It's just not true. But so I was pleased to see that. You know, some people will say, Richie's just trying to get in his appointments before he splits.
It's like the pardons at the end of it.
I actually once applied to be on the water board, so maybe I should have applied this time. But honestly, my Mondays are busy.
You're a little busy.
Yeah, I'm a little
Robert.
busy. But they actually appointed 2 new members to the water board.
Do you know any of these people?
Actually, I don't know either people.
Okay.
There was the Early Childhood Task Force, I think it was called, a few years ago, made some recommendations. That has now led to something called the City's Birth to Grade 3 Partnership. They appointed this whole steering committee. There's going to be a bunch of subcommittees. They're basically really doing early childhood education and trying to do it right. Under the guidance and the strong, smart hands of Ellen Semenoff from the Department of Human Services program. So, you know,
so that's a new
good job, Richie
agency?
Rossi, in you know, making excellent appointments. There were appointments to the Arts Council, Advisory Board, etc.
Well, aren't these names kind of given to him as recommendations from the existing? Because I know that's what we used to do on the Recycling Advisory Committee.
There's different ways of doing it.
Yeah.
You can make appointments based on the existing members, vetting people and whatever.
Right.
And I think that's pretty good.
Yeah,
but I have to say, there's one potential downfall with that, which is that if you have a board that has a particular philosophy, and
just gonna promote the same
they're a
philosophy.
little closed-minded.
Yeah.
And if you leave the decision to them to come up with the candidates or to vet the candidates, they're not going to allow anybody with a different point of view.
But then how else is it done? He solicits directly from his
basically
post to say we have these openings, and then people apply to Rossi?
Well, first off, everybody applies to the city manager.
First,
right?
okay,
Now,
I see.
I don't know if it was always done that way, but it's a public posting. I certainly promote it.
Yeah, I think I did that too the first time. I had to write a letter to him.
Right. So that's how it goes. Now, does the manager just make a decision, or does the manager consult with the existing
body that's
people,
doing this,
whatever, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a decision the manager has to make. And sometimes the manager says, well, we need more diversity in this, diversity of either gender, racial,
because they can't know everything. They probably want to find out who's on it, what do you, okay.
So I think the manager, as the appointing authority, has to be thoughtful about this.
Right.
And sometimes just trust the staff.
Yeah.
And sometimes just make a decision.
Okay.
You know?
So
I
think
think
that's been good. Okay.
That was pretty good,
And there were no problems with, except for the griping, you said, with the planning board?
Right, and that was just nonsensical,
All right.
honestly.
All right. That was last night?
That was last night, yeah.
Okay.
Now, another thing that's going to become an item down the road, I think there's already a neighborhood and long-term planning, arts celebrations, and Who's Watts committee meeting about it. It was a report up from the Broadband Task Force.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
Which was promoting a municipal broadband network. I know Saul Tannenbaum, who's been on this program.
Susan Fleischman.
We're really sort of big on, at least looking into this. But the latest report, again, I'll probably get grief for emphasizing this, is that basically says, oh yeah, it might cost us $187 million to build out a network, fiber network.
For the whole city, right?
Right, but always with the risk that that Comcast or some other competitor could then undercut you.
Right, and then you're stuck with something.
And so you might have this big boondoggle where you've sunk a lot of money into infrastructure, but the other guy can beat you, and so the customers stay with the existing vendor.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So the way I look at this, among other things, is that this is a point of tremendous what they call financial exposure for the city. City, not that AAA bond ratings is the only consideration, but the thing is, there are reasons why we spun off the Cambridge Hospital and formed the Cambridge Health Alliance. Because having the ups and downs of the hospital business be on our balance sheet was death to our bond rating and our financial stability. So we spun it off as an independent authority. The only way you could ever do municipal broadband is you'd have to create it as an independent authority. Right. But if they're talking about $100+ million of public investment, the bond rating agency is going to look at that and say, get lost.
Well, does this recall, you were around for when we wanted to own our own cable company?
Yeah.
Sort of reminiscent of that. It's like, and there was a referendum, and I was for the people that wanted to do it. Yeah. We won by 100 votes, and then we lost by 37 votes.
But you were going there from 0 to something.
I know, but in retrospect, it was a good decision to run our own cable company, because imagine what has happened since then.
Some of the same business decisions that Comcast, the evil empire, has to make, the municipality would then have to make too. And I don't know that there'd be a guarantee that it would be cheaper or better in the end.
Right.
So. Anyway, it may be a potential boondoggle, but they'll be looking into it.
Yeah, I'd like to go back to that at some point, because I think it was interesting what they said.
Down to 20 seconds. Just say quickly, the long-awaited eminent domain taking of the Vale Court project in Central Square. That vote happened. It was taken by eminent domain last night.
Was there any
8-0 to 1 vote, and it's not the end of the deal. There may still be legal challenges. So on that note,
all right.
See you next week on Cambridge Inside Out.